Hello and welcome to today's reading and reflection for Wednesday, July the 29th. The reading today is from Luke chapter 22, verses 39 to 46. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." There are so many things in this passage I could focus on. From the fact that Jesus went with his disciples to pray, the prayer that Jesus encouraged his disciples to pray, and then when he did pray, as well as the appearance of the angel, which gave him strength. But today I want to focus on the first verse I read. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. What was the usual? Something that wouldn't have made his disciples think there was something unusual about to happen. While he warned the disciples again about the temptations and trials that were about to overwhelm him, unlike us, with this wonderful gift of knowing what happens next in this unfolding story. The disciples had no idea what was about to happen. Everything about those events as they unfolded is surreal, it's bizarre, and it's quite horrifying, except one. The one which says there was something usual. Jesus was in his place of prayer. From the moment he took his first steps into public ministry, he'd walked closely with the Father. Prayer was the life-giving force. It had been his connecting link with his Father in heaven. It had been the source of their relationship. In prayer, Jesus discovered his God-given vocation and his understanding of ministry. He gained strength and he rejoiced, and he spoke honestly of his struggles. So now, here at this crucial moment in his life, he was prepared to face the hardest, most awful test of all. But first, in this moment, this was Jesus surrendering to God. This surrendering to God in prayer wasn't a panic prayer or a last-minute tactic he was using to dodge this difficult trial. It was an extended conversation, part of a continuing walk with his Father. Each step of his life, each moment of his ministry, he had completely and continually submitted to God's will. Jesus could pray that the Father's will would be done because he'd done it so often before in this usual place. This was not unusual. This was the norm. Martin Luther was once asked by a friend what his plans were for the following day. He replied, "Work, work from early until late. In fact, I have so much to do that I shall spend the first 3 hours in prayer." And here in this moment, Jesus knew that the work from early till late was going to be a whole different ball game. Jesus knew what the next few hours would unfold into. And how did he start it? He started it in the same way that Martin Luther spoke of. He needed to spend time in prayer. In a usual place. The unusual was about to happen, but Jesus needed the usual to get him started. as much as we all need to find time to spend with each day with God, as much as we might find ourselves in the middle of the day having that moment where we have to just stop and refocus, it helps when we have a usual place. Just as many people do, I like finding time alone to be with God, without distractions, time when it's just me and God. But the second half of that first verse says that the disciples followed him. This was not Jesus taking himself away from them and then praying in secret. This is once again Jesus modelling behaviour for the disciples and ultimately for us to learn from. Yet despite the disciples following him, we can be certain, because as we read the next few verses, that Jesus prayed this prayer alone. Jesus showed people how to do things, showed them the way, but he still took time out alone to be with God, his Father. The usual. But when the unusual was happening, this was the norm. So when even if times get tough, do you have a time carved out in your day where you surrender your will to the Father? Do you have the usual place where you go and offer your heart to God? It can be at your computer as you take time each day to draw close to the Father. It can be sat in the car. It can be out walking the dog. It can be anywhere that it is usual. But finding that time each day gives us the opportunity to refocus, to draw close to the Father and to offer him our hearts once more. It can be in the quiet of the morning or in the evening or at noon, whatever time suits us best. In the same way that this was the time which Jesus knew he needed to refocus, to accept what was about to happen. And there in that usual place where we meet God our Father and we say, Father, I want your will, not mine. When we do this, we can be sure that God hears us. We can be sure that God will give us what we need to face those situations, those times in our lives where it may be tough, where it may be challenging. But in that moment, we ask that God will bring all works in our lives to ultimately bring him the glory. And if finding that usual place is difficult, ask God to reveal that place to you. And I'm sure that you'll find it becomes a place that you will return to time and time again, just as Jesus returned to the garden at the Mount of Olives time and time again. I pray that you will find your usual place, a place to be with God, because when we face the unusual, we need the stability. Amen.